Hello, and welcome to this KubeCon preview, CloudNativeCon as well. 2025, going to be live in London, and we're really excited to have this conversation on theCUBE today. I'm joined by Stu Miniman, who's a Senior Director at Red Hat, long-term friend of theCUBE. Again, we've gone back and forth many times, and I think this is, something that we both feel passionate about, so it's really a lot of fun. I think that, what I love is the energy that Red Hat brings to KubeCon, or KubeCon, whichever way you want to say it, I guess, nowadays. But I think, a lot of what we've been talking about, and you and I talked about this, I think probably the last two times we've been on having this preview, is that it's really not as much about the nuts and bolts of Kubernetes. We're past the 10 years. There's a lot of projects that have graduated at this point, and we're really looking at a pretty differentiated stack that is being brought to bear. So kind of let's dive into some of the stuff that you're seeing and what you're going to be doing. You guys have your Commons up front, that's front loading it. What do you have going on at Commons this year?
Okay, great. So Rob, with what you just asked me, I think I've got about a half an hour of things I can talk about there. Let's start with the event. First of all, right, KubeCon, CloudNativeCon, the European version of this, which is in London. It's not in the EU, but it's still in Europe. Filled out my forms, paid the $13 US. I'm good for 2 years to go through London. It is a phenomenal show. Felt like, what was it, Rob? 10, 15 years ago, like the industry shows seemed to die. Right. It was all the big vendor shows, the Amazon and VM worlds of the like. This show, community, industry, phenomenal. And it's one of the only ones that I know, other than like Mobile World Congress, where the European version is actually bigger and it's a little better than the US one. The US one's great. You were at Salt Lake City. A bunch of my team was there. And it's awesome. We love all the KubeCons equally, but the European show, I mean, I will be booked solid for my time there because there's so many people to meet with. And as you said, we've reached a certain maturity, and we're always like, okay, hey, are we past peak and is it irrelevant? But, the last couple of years of this show, it's like, well, hey, what does this cloud native ecosystem mean? Rob, we used to talk for years about like, oh, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. I'm like, okay, this cloud native architecture is the underpinning for all of that. Yeah. And not only is Kubernetes itself mature and a standard for most things, but the ecosystem around it, which we'll talk about more, that's really built out and reached a certain level of maturity. The foundation gets them from the sandbox to the incubated to the graduated. And there's like a nice stack that's built there, but it's not a rigid stack. I've got lots of flexibility. And it's how is this really ready for that next generation when we start picking up things like AI?
Yeah, I think that was a perfect thing. Yeah, I always get excited about it because especially in Salt Lake, like you said, which was bigger than had been Paris, which was right before that in the EU, actually in the EU versus Europe. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see because I think that there was such an expanse of smaller companies as well. A lot of, those incubated projects that have moved through Sandbox and had gone and graduated now have some ecosystem partners building upon that. And really, to your point, bringing it into the stack from, top to bottom. I think some of the big things that we've seen there is security is going to continue to be. I would not be shocked to hear a lot about AI, not unsurprisingly. And the infrastructure and how Kubernetes is really a pretty good place to build out your AI. I mean, I think OpenAI was talking about it every year about doing that. And it looks like there's going to be a lot more noise about that.
Yeah, but, Rob, people, if you haven't looked at this ecosystem in a while, people got overwhelmed. It was like you put up the landscape and, there were all these memes of putting, oh my God, what do I do? There's like 200 open source projects. Well, yes, there are 200 open source projects. And probably in the next, between now and when we get to the actual show, there'll probably be another announcement of one or two in there at least, but some of them have matured. We have had areas where the foundation has brought projects together or ones have fallen by the wayside. And what we've seen coming together is more of that, okay, hey, what am I using for observability? I understand that. Security. Look, we always know there's going to be more than one tool in there in many projects, and open source has a real fit in there, but, open source based cloud native architectures and, pushing that into AI more and more is, super exciting. And some of the areas where, it used to be kind of the project flavor of the year. Like I remember back, I think it was the KubeCon in Austin, like way back in was that like 2017 and 2018? And it was like, oh my God, Istio.
Yeah.
And it was like, everybody was like, service mesh. We've had customers since early days on that. The last 18 months, oh my gosh, adoption of that has been phenomenal. Knative, serverless, once again, talked about it for years. The last year and a half, 2 years, there's been huge growth in that area. And there's always going to be the new pieces last year, I think we talked about K-serve and, some of the flow architectures for AI. And it's okay, coming out of this year, if you haven't heard of Ramalama, it's going to be a new project that you're going to want to hear about as to how some of these pieces do. So there always will be the new ones, but we've been separating the wheat from the chaff on some of the other projects and simplifying the stack. And it's an area where Red Hat, we absolutely have, a large contribution to it. We are working on lots of projects, many that aren't even in our products yet, just because if you go to they have a project pavilion in the expo hall, and there's a lot of Red Hatters there because they're passionate about it, they contribute it, and our guidance is always, project before product, especially when a show like this. So I'm not coming branded. You all have some Red Hat branding for me here, which I love, but we are there to support the ecosystem and the community.
Yeah, and I think what's fantastic about exactly the community is that just looking through all of the different things that are being talked about from platform engineering and how people are bringing that together. Observability is another big one that is so wide-ranging, and there's going to be so many different. In fact, it actually makes the keynote this year, which with one of the sponsors as well. And I think that there's security and artificial intelligence and machine learning, kind of really the big four. And then there's another one where you guys are playing, like you said, at MWC and telecom and what's happening in that space as well, because there's a lot going on with 5G and beyond and 5G plus. I think that it's going to be a very interesting, there's something for everybody, which is why I think it has become a center of gravity for so many people and so many organizations to come to. I also like the fact that there's been a lot more contributions. And I think that, the CNCF has been leaning into, and the Linux Foundation have been leaning into, how do we bring more, big tent, bring more people and more organizations that aren't vendors in to help and contribute. To your point, join them up with people like Red Hat and others that are doing a lot of contributions.
Yeah, Rob, I do love that. First of all, shout out to the CNCF. It's not just some environments are okay, here's the vendors, and they all fight and they argue over this. I used to do standards work early in my career and lived through some of that. I know you've got history there too. But they have members that are participate, and some of them are ones we've worked with. So back at KubeCon Detroit, Ford, front and center. We help them with some of their education process, and they're contributing upstream to some of those projects and, really involved in how software, because look, automotive, is that a software? Sure, I hope so. Rob, you and I both drive EVs. Right. We know software's, kind of important on that stuff there. And it allows me, shout out, you talked about what's the day zero event that we do? It's OpenShift Commons. And what is that? Primarily a place for peers to talk with their peers, and we have a bunch of them up on stage. Yeah. In Salt Lake City, we had a university talking about their move from actually Red Hat's virtualization to containerization. And not only did they do here's the architecture and everything we did, they let the audience give them 15, 20 minutes of just grilling them on questions. And it's all up on YouTube for everybody to watch after. So I'm super excited for the lineup that we have for the London KubeCon. It is on the day zero, which is April 1st. It's about a 5-minute walk from the main convention center. And unlike most of the day zero events, you actually don't even need a KubeCon pass. You don't need to have a ticket to be able to go there. You do need to register. So if you just search for OpenShift Commons, you'll find the website. You can register for it.
And we'll put it in the description down below.
Get it in there because obviously, the end users get priority to get in there. We love having partners and Red Hatters there, but they'll have more time. So I'm super excited. I've always found I can actually finish that day and being oh my gosh, my trip is fulfilled because I got such goodness there. And then you dive into the main show. The other day zero event that we have a large presence on, you mentioned it, platform engineering is such a hot spot. So Backstage Con, we're top level sponsor. We've got somebody giving the keynote. We're part of that. We've got a big team on that. And that's been part of most of the customer conversations I've been having for the last year, is how platform engineering fits into it. It's crazy. I think it was like at the Amsterdam show, like I did a panel on it when it was like pretty nascent at that point. And today, most customers are understanding the maturity level that I need to get to. It should look like platform engineering at the end. So if I can actually have a tool set with like Backstage at the core of that, that can help. And that's what we productized as Red Hat Developer Hub.
Yeah, and I think what's great, and I mean, that's one of my favorite projects, as you know, because big platform engineering, anything you can do to bring these organizations and the different silos together, which that project and the products on top of that really do. And I think to your point, Amsterdam's 2 years ago, Paris last year. It has been interesting to see the progression and the amount of tracks. In fact, there's a ton of tracks on platform engineering this year at KubeCon CloudNativeCon. And I think, again, when you start to look at that, it's really bringing together a lot of what people are trying to do across that kind of lifecycle management of cloud native applications. And I think anybody who's in this and been seeing how organizations, either being microservice or not, but going and building out container-based applications, this kind of stuff, and being able to have that control and insight is key.
Yeah, it's always a balance. I know when I would talk to people from the CNCF or the people that ran the events, is how do you balance, I want to learn about the new stuff, and how do I get out we still have more than half the people attending usually are first-time attendees. So how do I learn the basics? How do I learn the understand? One thing is funny, you talked about Backstage and containerization. It's actually talking to my team. I've got the advanced cluster management team for tech marketing, it reports to me. And we were talking about it this week, and they're like, yeah, we've got a customer that's actually using it for their VM lifecycle management. So yes, cloud native for the most parts in our brains equals Kubernetes equals containers. But, we're how far into the interview, and we do need to talk about, virtualization. I was
going to say that's a perfect lead into KubeVirt.
Rob, what's the number 3, contribution project in the CNCF? It's KubeVirt. So it's a super hot topic. Yeah. And that balance of a lot of those companies aren't deep into learning the modernization and the cloud native architectures. KubeVirt allows me to take that step into it and have the future path to be able to modernize at my own pace. So it's been super interesting. I expect to have a really good customer speaking at OpenShift Commons from Europe that is well along this journey. And of course, it's not long after, in May, we'll be down the road in Boston for Red Hat Summit. And we have a lot of customers that will be sharing what they've done in the last year. And I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's one of these things that, in fact, in some of the organizations I've been talking to, that have started to transition from other hypervisors and things like that to KubeVirt, they're really looking at it and trying to figure out the maturity as well. And you do have a lot of customers who've been, I remember, and I won't name names at Red Hat, but one of your customers, they didn't start with just one of the, easy workloads from a VMware migration perspective. They looked at it from a VDI perspective. And VDI to me is not the easiest of workloads to migrate somewhere else. What are some of the other things that you're seeing that people are looking at from a workload use case with KubeVirt?
Yeah, so Rob, the thing is, we've got 20 years of virtual machines sitting there, so it does take all types. You're right, that one financial services customer had been using VMware for over 20 years, and it was a custom VDI solution, not even the off-the-shelf stuff. But we've really got just a really broad spectrum. So there's certain applications that I guess you'd look at and remember the last applications that were do we keep them bare metal or do we virtualize them? And by the time we got to 5.0, we were like, okay, I've got monster VMs and I can do the memory and all that. We got those. Some of those, you have the discussion again is hey, does it make sense to just re-virtualize it, is the term that one of the big analyst firms used, or do I actually go back to bare metal? Because what was the advantage of doing it? The advantage of doing it is I want to get my arms around managing the entire fleet. But most workloads I can run in containers, and I have for a while. But there's some that I'm just going to move to SaaS. There's some that I'm going to move to some cloudified version of something, and that often is going to be containerized. We've had, more than 10 years into OpenShift itself, which predated Kubernetes, we've had lots of predictive AI workloads for years, and now we're starting to get more of the Gen AI workloads and can be the underpinning for the agentic AI stuff. So the answer is, like Rob, it is a mix. We do have some really good tooling to do an assessment because it's not necessarily, oh, does this application work? It's, hey, what are actually the hooks underneath for the storage and the networking? Those of us that grew up in the virtualization world remembers it took us like a decade to fix all of that. The good news is we learned from all of that. Our solution, we can work with a broad spectrum of the storage providers. Networking, it depends, but not only does open source have a lot of networking, but partners like Cisco have always had alternatives there that we can work with. So it's good. We've done some very large migrations already, but not every customer is at, oh, hey, yeah, we can move all of your stuff. It might be 70, 80% of your environment, and the last bit, you need to figure out what you do. Just like, Rob, you talk to my friends at IBM more than I do. We still talk about like, what application do I run on the mainframe or on the, P series? And there's still Unix out there, which, Red Hat has almost 30 years of trying to get people off of Unix and onto Linux. So it is, the devil's in the details. It's been a wild ride for us for the last 18 years, and it's been super exciting. There's a lot of momentum. It was, I don't often say that listening to IBM's earnings is exciting, but there was some good notes in there as to just how far we've come, especially got shout outs about the virtualization stuff.
I agree. I thought it was an awesome earnings call, to put it mildly. And I think, again, when you start to look at the ecosystem and partnerships outside of IBM that you're working with, because you almost work more outside of IBM than you do inside of IBM, for that matter. I think there's a lot going on within the communities there. And I think, we always talk about the hallway conversations being some of the best. In fact, outside of Commons, that's one of my favorite things, was the fact that Commons, you get really, like you said, unfiltered feedback and thought-provoking stuff from the customers that, isn't paid for commercial, to put it mildly, which I thought it was great. And there's also the fact that you're there, to your point, with others who are in the same boat as you as well.
Yeah, Rob, I agree. The hallway conversation is one of the main things to go. I'm curious. So I wasn't in Salt Lake City, but I know some of the undercurrents that I hear sometimes is many of the large customers in this companies that contribute in this ecosystem now, we all have the pressure of like AI. So I've seen certain groups where it was like, hey, these are the ones that would come to KubeCon and contribute. And all of a sudden, now they're pulled onto AI projects, and they might be open source projects, but the things that we think about in that stack that I was talking about, like who's still involved there? And it's an area where, our commitment is unwavering and we're there. And it's actually been a bigger opportunity for us, for some of our large partners, where it's like, oh, okay, maybe instead of some of these alternatives that were growing, Red Hat is established leader in this space, and we can help people even more. So it's interesting to see kind of the amount of effort where people are hiring and, where there is momentum.
Yeah, Salt Lake was, you couldn't take a step without tripping over AI. And in Salt Lake, to put it mildly, I think that what will be interesting is where the security aspect, I've already went through the catalog, and there's a observability of AI seems to be one of the major themes, which has me scratching my head, because there's a lot of things that go into that. That's a loaded term. It's almost like AI ops, which I thought was a horrible thing for observability. AI ops and ML ops and all of the ops, I look at it and go, observability of AI, are you observing how they're working, how it's working together? Are you looking at the infrastructure that's supporting it, the security of it? It is going to be a huge effort there. And I think one of the things is going to be working in an open manner is going to be so key.
Yeah.
And you guys work a lot with the folks in open telemetry and Prometheus and Jaeger and even up into the Grafana stuff. And what do you see as kind of like a guidance to people who are trying to make out their schedule for going at KubeCon? Because I look at it and go, I get it, because I've been to enough of them.
Sure.
But what I love is that 50% of the audience, if not more, is always first timers.
Yep.
Especially in Europe.
Yeah. So Rob, Absolutely. First of all, right, AI ops might not love, but we need to make sure we don't have AI oops instead.
Very good.
But the general guidance I've had is, remember, this is a choose your own adventure. So what am I best spending time in? So if there's a lab that I'm interested, that should go to the top of your list, because a lot of the breakouts, I can just watch the recording. Is there a speaker that I actually wanted to go get a question into? Yeah, go track that down and go do it. But don't run yourself ragged going to session, because as you and I both said, our favorite part of this usually is the hallway conversation. So if I bump into somebody, I don't want to just have the, oh, hey, great to see you. Hope I get to spend more than 5 seconds with you. It's like, no, let's stop for, do you have 5 minutes? Let's talk. That's going to be so much valuable as a takeaway. And give yourself homework for when you get back, because there's going to be so much stuff to learn. I make sure, like usually, the 2 days of opening keynotes are definitely worth attending. Yes. You don't necessarily have to stay for the whole thing. And give yourself time to walk around the show floor. Pro tip is, if you're interested in the swag, it's usually like, at the open of the show floor is good. At the open of the hall crawl, there, bring stuff out. You stop by the Red Hat booth, there might be red fedoras, when they come on. But and there's usually things like book signings. So, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And again, from a topic area, it is better to be like, oh, hey, I love observability. Let me go to 5 sessions. Then I'm going to do the, the menu of, one of each. And I come out of there being like, oh my gosh, I'm just overwhelmed. And that's, typical at any of these big shows, is it's really easy to get overwhelmed. So this one is good. So and another thing, you mentioned it, if there's an area where I can actually get involved, go spend some time, go to the project pavilion, go figure some things out. They are always looking for more people to help. And that does not necessarily mean that you're doing Git commits and pulls. It can be documentation. It can be coordination. I have areas where I've contributed to communities, and it's not at the code level.
Yeah, so I've run research groups and things like that, and I was not doing a lot of commits, to put it mildly. Exactly. But no, I think that's a great thing. And I think also, along with the Commons, the Red Hat Commons, there's also a lot of other day zero things going on, like Observability Day. And I think there's a data on Kubernetes day thing going on, which is part of the day, not the full day and stuff like that. But also some of that content does stream into the rest of the normal show as well. My suggestion is you look at the things you can, to your point, focus and prioritize, because you will be overwhelmed. The Excel Center, having been there myself many times before, first off, getting to the Docklands and getting over there, it's going to take a little bit of time. So give yourself time in that. The DLR is fantastic getting over there. So, and definitely check out the curry while you're over there.
Yeah. And Rob, I've only been to the Excel Center once, and it was like, oh, okay. Yeah. As a facility, it's great, but it's similar to being at the Fura Center in Barcelona or some of these others. Oh, I'm going to do a group dinner. Cool. Expect yourself to have half hour, 45 minutes to be able to get there, because it's not next door.
Yes. And taxis take forever. So just
wait,
FYI.
I only take taxis when I'm coming to and from the airport. Other than that, I use the tube.
Yes. Using the DLR to get to one of the other tubes is the best way to get around in there, and you'll be able to get everywhere as well. And like I said, food-wise, there's a lot of different venues. You were saying you have a whole bunch of dinners already booked up. I have yet to do that. I am behind the ball on that. But
hey, come on, Rob. What West End shows are you going to see? It's in London. You need to take advantage of these things. So,
exactly.
I do have the advantage. My wife has done some of the planning on this because she'll be over, and it was just like, okay, honey, this is when I'll be there. And then for these 3 days, you won't see me. So exactly. We know how it is on the road life, but super looking forward to it. It's going to be a great event. Hope to see a lot of the community there.
Well, thanks, Stu. I think this has been great. I think it'll give people a really good focus on what to look at. We'll be there. I'm sure I'll see you there as well, again, and all the team from Red Hat. I know we have a whole bunch of them coming on. I love it because you guys put up some of the people who are really into the details of things, but make it relatable to the people who are just getting involved, which is fantastic. I think that, to me, is what we strive for at this event, to put it mildly.
Yeah, love it, Rob. And even quick plug, Red Hat is part of the Thursday morning keynote. So not only will you see the short piece there, but expect to see those people on theCUBE to dig into it even deeper. So that's what you guys do a great job with.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love it when we get your team on. So the Red Hat team always does a great job breaking it down for people, especially at this event. So thank you for coming on board today. We both had about the similar drive, so that's been fantastic. Not a long drive for this event, but we have a slightly longer drive for the next one.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing you across the pond.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for watching this KubeCon CloudNativeCon, and I emphasize CloudNativeCon, London 2025 preview, where we're going to really be there live, breaking things down, live on theCUBE, bringing you the analysis and the news of what's going on, and helping you dig a little deeper, giving you some focus. Stay tuned, and we'll see you there.